So they're the deepest fish in the world, but they're not a deep sea fish. But they've speciated into every corner of the globe, and they've overtaken all the deep sea fish. So these ones, as you see in the video, are 1,000 meters deeper than what you would normally think of as being a deep sea fish.
March 6th, 2025. A team of microbiologists at Shanghai Jiao Tong University are sitting around a screen in a research facility, and they have been awake for 36 hours straight reviewing genetic data their submersible pulled out of Mariana Trench sediment over 3 years of dives. Nobody in the room is talking. What scrolls across the monitor is not supposed to be there. 7,564 microbial species pulled out of mud 6 miles deep. 89.4% of them had never been documented before, never named, never recorded by science. An entire hidden ecosystem has been living at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, where the textbooks insisted almost nothing complex could survive. Dr. Weishu Zhao, the extremophile microbiologist leading the genomics team, finally breaks the silence. Her voice catches as she explains that the trench is actively shaping these organisms, forcing adaptations and driving evolution at speeds nobody had modeled, and she pronounces the words slowly because part of her is still trying to believe them. The data came up that morning. The implications are still landing. And what scientists keep finding at the bottom of the Mariana Trench is rewriting everything we thought we knew about life on Earth. For 100 years, the establishment view stayed simple. The deep ocean was dead. 6 miles down, the pressure crushes anything alive at 15,750 pounds per square inch, which works out to an elephant balanced on your thumb. Temperatures hover between 34 and 39 degrees Fahrenheit, sunlight stops at 1,000 feet, and by 36,000 feet, you are sitting in absolute, eternal darkness. This was the textbook. This was the science. In 2012, James Cameron piloted a custom submersible called the Deep Sea Challenger to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, becoming the first solo human to make that journey. When he came back up, he described what he had seen in one word: lunar. Cameron called the floor desolate, empty, a graveyard with no bodies, and he told NPR he had not expected a profusion of life and he had not seen one. His exact words were that you could not overinterpret from a single glimpse, but the glimpse he got was of nothing. Here's the catch: Cameron was wrong, he just didn't know it yet. January 23, 1960. Lieutenant Don Walsh of the United States Navy and Swiss oceanographer Jacques Piccard climbed into a steel sphere bolted underneath a fuel-filled bathyscaphe called the Trieste, and they began dropping for 4 hours and 47 minutes into the Challenger Deep. A window cracked at 27,000 feet, and they kept going anyway. The two men spent exactly 20 minutes on the bottom. Within those 20 minutes, Piccard claimed he saw something nobody believed was possible. A fish, about a foot long, flat like a sole, with 2 round eyes on top of its head, watching them through the porthole. The scientific community lost its mind. Fish were not supposed to exist below 26,000 feet because the biochemistry simply did not work, and at that pressure their cells should implode. For decades, the Trieste flatfish became the holy grail of deep-sea biology, until 2012, when Dr. Alan Jameson and Dr. Paul Yancey published a paper in Biological Bulletin titled "On the Validity of the Trieste Flatfish," dispelling the myth. Their conclusion was brutal. Piccard didn't see a fish, he probably saw a sea cucumber. And get this: Don Walsh, before he died in November 2023, admitted as much himself, telling reporters that neither he nor Jacques were trained biologists, and the critter could have been something else entirely. The deepest sighting in human history, the most famous moment in deep-sea exploration, came down to a misidentification. But here's where it gets stranger. While the scientific community was busy debunking the flatfish, the trenches were quietly hiding something Piccard could never have imagined. August 2022. The DSSV pressure drop sat on the surface of the Pacific Ocean 300 miles south of Japan, parked above a wound in the seafloor called the Izu Ogasawara Trench. A baited camera lander dropped into the dark and fell for hours before hitting bottom at 27,349 feet. The lights came on. The camera waited. Something swam into frame. The animal measured maybe 8 inches long. Its body was translucent. The kind of translucent where you can see the organs through the skin like wet tissue paper held up to a flashlight, and its head was delicate, almost embryonic. Movement came in slow waves, gentle enough that it looked more like a ghost than an animal. A snailfish, genus Pseudoliparis. At 27,349 feet, the deepest fish ever filmed in the history of the world. Back at the University of Western Australia, the team processed the footage, and Dr. Alan Jamieson, chief scientist of the Minderoo UWA Deep Sea Research Center, announced the find in April 2023. 15 years he had spent predicting fish would be down there. He had finally proven it. The part that nobody could explain was how. Pay attention to this part because the chemistry is what matters. Fish bodies rely on a molecule called TMAO, trimethylamine N-oxide, to keep their cells from collapsing under pressure, and the deeper the fish, the more TMAO they need. By 8,400 meters, the math says the cells should be saturated to the point of failure. They should pop. The Izu Ogasawara snailfish was 36 meters below that theoretical limit and swimming. If this is making your skin crawl, hit subscribe right now because what comes next is the part they tried to bury for 2 decades. Now, we come back to that room in Sanya, China. Between 2021 and 2024, a team led by Dr. Mengran Du at the Institute of Deep Sea Science and Engineering ran 23 dives in a Chinese submersible named Bendoge, which translates to striver. The vessel is rated to full ocean depth. The team wasn't looking for life at all. The focus was sediment and methane chemistry along subduction zone faults in the Kuril-Kamchatka and western Aleutian trenches. What turned up instead landed in the journal Nature on July 30th, 2025. At depths between 19,000 and 31,000 feet, scattered along 2,500 kilometers of trench floor, the cameras kept capturing the same impossible image: fields of tube worms, white mussel mounds, dense, thriving, complex animal communities surviving without sunlight, without photosynthesis, without any of the food chain inputs that biology textbooks insisted were required. These ecosystems were running on chemosynthesis, which means microbes were eating methane and hydrogen sulfide bubbling up from inside the Earth's crust, and entire animal communities were piling on top of that bacterial metabolism. Du's team documented 19 of these communities in a single expedition, with colonies stretching across an area larger than the country of France. Let that sink in. The deepest, coldest, darkest place we know of, and there is an ecosystem the size of a country down there feeding on poison gas leaking out of the broken floor of the Pacific. Dr. Andrei Gebruk of the Russian Academy of Sciences, who reviewed the findings, said it forces a complete rethinking of where life on Earth can exist. Because if biology works at 31,000 feet under 15,000 pounds of pressure in absolute darkness, then the assumptions we have made about other planets, about Europa, about Enceladus, about every ice moon orbiting a gas giant, are also wrong. But here's the thing: the chemosynthetic communities are only the visible layer. In March 2025, the journal Cell put a different study on its cover when the Mariana Trench Environment and Ecology Research Project, run jointly by Shanghai Jiao Tong University and the Chinese Academy of Sciences, finished 3 years of analyzing sediment samples from 1,648 separate locations across the Mariana Hadal Zone. The dataset they generated came in at 92 terabytes, 92 trillion base pairs of DNA pulled out of mud 6 miles deep. The number of microbial species they identified came to 7,564. 89.4% of them had never been documented before. Dr. Weishu Zhao, the extremophile microbiologist who led the genomics team, found something else buried in the data, which was that the Hadal microbes weren't randomly distributed at all. They were under intense selection pressure. The trench was actively shaping them, forcing adaptations and driving evolution at speeds nobody had modeled. She wasn't celebrating. Her response read closer to nervous. Nobody knows what those organisms are doing down there, what enzymes they produce, what compounds they secrete, or what role they play in the carbon cycle of the entire planet. 90% of an ecosystem just got discovered, and we have no idea what it does. Now, we come to the part that should bother you the most. Because while scientists kept finding life in the deepest place on Earth, they kept finding something else alongside it. In March 2020, a research team from Newcastle University trawled a baited trap up from 22,000 feet inside the Mariana Trench, and inside the trap was a new species of amphipod, a small shrimp-like crustacean. They named it Erythanes plasticus. The reason for the name came from what they cut out of the first specimen in the lab, a polyethylene terephthalate fiber sitting in its gut, a piece of microplastic from a water bottle, or a polyester shirt, or a synthetic carpet, lodged inside the very first individual of a species discovered 6 miles down. 3 years earlier, in 2017, Dr. Alan Jameson tested Mariana amphipods for industrial pollutants, and the numbers came back at 147 to 905 nanograms per gram of lipid weight, 50 times more contaminated than crabs from one of the most polluted rivers in China. Jameson gave the press one sentence about the findings, which was that the values were extraordinarily high. In 2018, oceanographer Victor Vescovo took a submersible called the Limiting Factor down to 35,853 feet, deeper than Walsh and Picard had gone, and spent 4 hours on the bottom looking for unique geological formations and unusual rocks. What he found was a plastic bag and candy wrappers, the deepest place on Earth, wallpapered in our garbage. When you stack the numbers together, they get difficult to look at. Of the entire deep ocean sea floor, less than 0.001% has ever been visually observed by a human being or a camera, and we have mapped only 28.7% of the ocean to high resolution as of 2026. Everything else is guesswork, sonar shadows, educated assumptions. More humans have walked on the surface of the moon than have visited the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Every single time we send a camera down there, we find something the textbooks insisted was impossible. Tube worm cities. Translucent fish 1,000 feet below the biochemical pressure limit. 7,000 species we did not know existed. Microbial ecosystems running on poison. In late 2025, Dr. Jameson said something quietly that should be the headline of every newspaper on the planet, which is that we don't actually know what's down there. Every expedition rewrites the map, and the trench keeps surprising us. The deeper we look, the more wrong we have been. So here's the question nobody can answer. If we have explored less than a fraction of 1% of the deep, and what we have found has already broken the rulebook 3 times in 3 years, what is sitting in the other 99%? What is alive at 36,000 feet that the cameras haven't reached yet? Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because the next discovery from the Mariana Trench is going to make this one look like a footnote. The cameras are still going down. The data is still coming up. And whatever has been waiting in the dark for the last 100 million years is finally being seen.